Hello and welcome to the Move Well, Live Well podcast.
We are your hosts, Antonio Capasso and Dave Fell, and we are here to help you, the listener, live a better life through exercise, nutrition, and mindset. The aim of this podcast is to motivate, inspire, and educate the masses, giving practical tips and golden nuggets on how to get moving and live a healthy and fulfilled life.
This podcast is for anybody who's wanting to exercise but struggles to get started or to make it stick. It's for anybody who's chasing goals but never seems to feel satisfied, or simply anyone who wants to live a healthier and happier life.
As a licensed sport and exercise psychologist, I use my knowledge of human behaviour and psychological theory to help both everyday people and Olympic level athletes achieve their performance and lifestyle goals.
I'm an online coach and former unfulfilled corporate cog. I've built a platform through providing healthy and budget recipes and practical exercise tips to as many people as I can. I'm not the biggest, leanest, strongest or fittest coach, but I do pride myself in being the most well-balanced. We want you to take away so many golden nuggets from this podcast that you'll have to eat them with milk.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Move Well, Live Well podcast. Today's episode is all about how to prime your environment to win. This is a nice follow-on from last week's episode where we started speaking about how to be ruthlessly consistent, and I think we even made slight references into what we're going to talk about on today's episode. But I think a lot of the time people can fall into the trap of thinking that everything is on them and trying to make sure that they can do all this stuff by themselves, when actually, it's okay to lean on others and also, use the environment around you to help yourself stay consistent and also then ensure that you're winning and reaching those goals. Dave, I'm excited for this episode. I don't know about you.
Yeah, absolutely buzzing. And obviously we really wanted to talk about this, moving on from last week's episode and building upon that, because a lot of people, they think, or they leave a lot of their decisions in life down to the willpower in the moment. And as it's been proven, willpower is a limited resource that individuals have. So the more times that you test yourself to have that willpower, the less likely you are going to be to do those things that you want to do. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about how you can prime your environment to make it as easy as possible to remove that friction so that you can actually win more and do more of the stuff that you say you do. And again, a lot of people think if it's down to that decision in the moment, that's where I like to slip up. So this is all about how to actually make it easier for yourselves to follow through with those actions.
Yeah, bang on. I love that idea that willpower is limited. Unfortunately, we're not robots. We are based on emotions. I've listened to a podcast that was great the other day that was like people go down this idea of like logical philosophy and being able to think really rationally, but it all goes out the window as soon as you throw emotions in. And unfortunately, we are emotional thinking beings, so we can't cut that part of us out. Well, not yet anyway.
Not yet.
The idea that willpower is limited, but what we'll look at today is, how the environment can help us in managing this willpower and having to rely less on willpower alone, but also utilizing things such as cues, our social environment, and other little tips and tricks that we'll share along the way. But I think that the first part that I want to share is the fact that the brain is wired to take the path of least resistance. And that's really important because that is why, we can find it so easy. You might, the night before be like, right, going to go to the gym, feel motivated. And the next morning you wake up, you're a bit fatigued. And suddenly it's like the brain doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, and that's it. And, we spoke about this on the last pod, and people, and again, it's not down to individual fault. We are wired as humans to want that path of least resistance. And if you can remove as many barriers as possible and make whatever you want to do, whether it's a new habit or whether it's a task or an event that you're working towards, if you can remove as much of that friction as you can, it will make you so much more likely to actually follow through and do those things.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the first things you can start doing is by utilizing cues. Now, cues are signals in an environment that trigger a behavior or a routine. And there's loads of different types of cues that we can use. And I'll probably use Dave as my little, I was going to say experimental bunny, but that's completely wrong.
Have to be a huge guinea pig.
Yeah, that's the one. But just to share exactly how we can use the different types of cues. So there's loads of different types of cues, but kind of the main ones we'll focus on today is our visual cues, digital cues, auditory cues, social cues, and then things such as habit bundling as well. All right. Dave, what comes to mind when I just say a visual cue?
So what comes to mind for me and how I visualize that, and just to use a practical example, when I used to work in the office, there was visible cues everywhere in the office about, you know, what to eat, what to drink and stuff like that. And one that stands out really clearly to me is there was a bowl of like small chocolate bars and like having that visual cue. Every time I walked past it, I had to make a conscious decision to not grab something from that bowl. So that's a way in which it can work, you know, against you. And again, we said willpower is limited. So the more times that you have to walk past that bowl and actively think, I'm not going to have anything out of that, the more time you're testing yourselves. But then obviously that can work in the opposite way, that if you have a positive visual cue, if that bowl of chocolate, say, is a bowl of fruit or something like that, then actually that might be more positive in the way that if you see it, you'll be like, okay, well, if I do grab that, then that's it. So that's what springs to my head in terms of, you know, when we mention a visual cue, and I guess it's all about making them as easy and convenient as possible to spot.
100%. Yeah. So there's things such as like putting your trainers where you can see them. So when you're like walking past, you're already sort of subconsciously, when you're just like walking to the kitchen, if you're working from home and you've brought your trainers and your gear into the office and you just put them under your desk so that you're walking past thinking, oh yeah, on my lunch break, I'm going to go for that round. It's that subtle reminder that's in the background that always keeps you sort of thinking about exercise or how you can get that exercise and movement into your day. The next cue I've mentioned was digital cue, right? And I don't think anyone can say anymore that like seeing this thing, right, sitting in their line of sight.
Phone, by the way.
Yeah, this is a phone. A very, very old iPhone now, as Dave likes to remind me.
Tony's potato phone.
Yeah. But the idea, right, is that, and we spoke about how social media can be great, but also work against you. It's the same thing with digital objects as well, right? So we know we're going to go on our phones for something. So how can we use that digital cue, okay, to actually trigger us to think about movement again? Dave, is there anything that you've done on that?
Well, it's funny, like when we were discussing the podcast before and when we talked about it, I had a digital cue on my phone when I first started posting, and I think it was in 1 week I grew like 80 followers or something like that. So then I took that away and then I put it into like a bit of an Excel spreadsheet, and I was like, I grew my following that week by like, it was like 8% or something like that. And then I said, if I do that every week and it continues to grow by 8%, although I have like 400 followers at the minute, by X time, by 52 weeks or 18 months or whatever it is, I'll have this many followers. So I actually put that at the background of my phone. So any time that a post maybe flopped or didn't go as I wanted to, I had that digital cue be like, no, this is how much you can grow if you just stay consistent and keep posting. So for something like me, like for someone like me, that kept me really kind of like consistent and focused on the process rather than thinking about the outcome and like, I want this many followers or this, you know, to happen in my business. I was just that little digital cue to say, if I do this and I do it consistently, then ultimately that will lead to growth.
Yeah, perfect. So there you go. That's one great example, is using that wallpaper, using that background of your phone. Often if I've worked with clients before establishing values, I'll be like, right, stick that on your background. So every time you're unlocking your phone, you're looking at, okay, this is who I'm trying to be. So it's one way to really nail in, the emphasis on this, by engaging exercise, you can become this type of person. Then of course the other ones are like setting alarms on your phone. So, okay, my phone's gone off. You got to switch it off. You see, time to go for a run. Even if you can't go for it right then, again, it's that way. It's reminding you, I said I was going to do a run, or it reminded me I said I was going to go to the gym, or I was going to go and message someone about if they're available later to go and do something. Of course, we'll get onto social environments and building those relationships in a little bit. Another one which is really nice, which leads us nicely onto the third cue we're going to talk about, is playlists as well. Like, use your phone, open Spotify, Apple Music, whatever one you use. If you use Amazon Music, I'll be really surprised. But using your mobile devices or laptop, whatever, to start playing a playlist that is going to like trigger that burst of energy, or maybe help release a little bit of motivation, because we know that music plays a huge role in how we feel. Auditory cues, again, like an alarm that actually triggers that thing of like, oh, I set this alarm because I said I was going to go for a run. A playlist that you start playing to yourself and you think to yourself, oh, that reminds me, or it feels very upbeat and makes me want to go engage this type of exercise. Equally as well, getting a message alert from a friend, texting you saying, are you going to come out for this run later? So this is ways in which we can use our audio around us to again trigger and make us think about, okay, actually I said I was going to go and do exercise.
I honestly don't know why more people don't just use the alarm function in their phone, whether you've got an iPhone, Android, whatever it is. Like my girlfriend's like, oh, can you remind me to book these tickets to this? And I'm like, go in your alarms, set the name of the alarm to whatever you want to do. And I do this all the time. I've got literally like 50 alarms that are all like different tasks that I've got to do. She's like, remind me at 9 a.m. I'm like, go into your alarms, set the name of the alarm to whatever task it is you want to do and set that time. And it seems so simple, but so many people don't do this. And honestly, start doing that to help you like structure some tasks. If it's obviously time bound or whatever it is, then you can just put it as an alarm on your phone, and then hopefully that'll help you do more tasks. Exactly what we're doing in terms of these audio cues.
Yeah, and also like reminders as well. You don't just have to use the alarm system. Like reminders on my phone are so good because one, you get the alert, and then two, you also get the like it stays there until I click that I've done that task. It stays there as a constant reminder, and sometimes it really annoys me because I'm like, oh, I don't have time for that, but it's still there ticking in the back of my head. The fourth one, which I think is really undervalued, is emotional cues, right? So I know that you, Dave, go for a walk every Wednesday morning. Is that right?
Walk and talk with my mum every Wednesday morning, or at least trying to. But yeah, try to get out first thing in the morning for a morning walk. Yeah.
And I'm guessing for you, there's an emotional cue that comes along with that, right? When you wake up, you think, oh, I'm gonna speak to my mum on the phone, which I'm hoping gives you like a positive emotion, right?
Absolutely does. And mum, if you're listening to this, it definitely does. Right?
Yeah. So the idea is that way of like, I'm feeling stressed, linking that emotional cue of I'm feeling stressed to actually I should go for a walk, because we know that moving relieves stress, reduces that cortisol that's being put into our bloodstream, and actually helps us cope. So again, using exercise and movement as a coping mechanism, but also linking that relationship up. So I'm stressed. What can I do to try and release that stress? Well, actually, I can go out and move, and then thinking what different types of movements they are and how that can help you. So that's one that I really like. And then the final one that I've got here as a cue is actually like building habits and habit bundling. You might think, how's that a cue? But we're going to discuss today is when it comes to reducing barriers is like mapping out, and I know we spoke about it last week, but mapping out your week on a calendar so that it starts becoming a habit. Does that make sense?
100%. And again, it's like, it's tying them together. So if a cue for you is like brushing your teeth, if that is a cue to then start your bedtime routine, it's okay. What else can you do there? For any of the girly pops listening, it's like your full FaceTime skin routine you probably have on Tony. Guys got amazing skin. But yeah, so that could be a trigger. So a trigger to do something could also be a habit that you already do, because we all brush our teeth, hopefully twice a day, every day. So it's like, okay, so what can you do? If it's boiling the kettle to get a cup of tea or whatever it is, instead of just standing there scrolling on your phone, could you do some squats, or could you do some stretches, or something that you need to do? So that could be a cue to then start doing a task that you need to do. So I guess that's what you're referring to there.
Yeah, 100%. It's a task that you can start building in and overlapping with other habits that you're already starting to do. The other bit is it takes like 12 weeks to build a habit. And it only takes like 2 weeks to lose it. Mm-hmm. Okay, which is the reason why I share that is because what's really important for us to start doing is actually you're going to have to set that reminder that I want to start doing this habit in the first place. That makes sense. So when you start actually, being like, right, I know that normally in about 6 o'clock in the evening, I'll finish work. I'm probably gonna make myself a cup of tea. You set that reminder alert of being like tea/squats. Makes sense. And then every week you start getting that on a Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday evening. And then eventually it gets to 6 p.m. You go to make a cup of tea and you've made that connection, right?
So we spoke about it a little bit. Well, we spoke about a lot bit there, and obviously the different types of cues. But then, what other like practical examples do you have in potentially priming your environment to actually set up these cues?
Yeah.
And what examples of cues have you used in your life to then do that. Putting them on the spot. We didn't plan this.
There's a lot of questions here, so I'll start off with the first one, right, which is prime the environment.
Yeah, so obviously we've spoken about the different types of cues. If someone wants to take that away and actually be able to prime their environment, what does that look like for a normal person?
Yeah, so straight away what I'm thinking about is, okay, if I'm going to prime my environment, I'm going to look at barriers, right? Okay, so I look at my week, I look at what my priorities are currently in my life. So that'll be, of course, like your work, career comes, seeing friends might come, and then hopefully if I listen to our podcast, you're now thinking about, right, I need to move or get exercise in. Okay, so 3 priorities there. You have your week mapped out. Okay, you then start looking at your calendar. Okay, I'm seeing Dave on Wednesday. Can I, because I want to like obviously keep building that relationship, keep seeing my mate. Can I link that in with doing a run, right? Or can we go, last Wednesday actually had a really nice run with 2 mates, and we ended up going for pizza and a Coke afterwards, right? Fantastic. I've now built in to my weekly schedule 2 things there, right? So I've combined them already, right? The next thing is looking at, okay, I'm going to go to work I go into the office on Tuesday. Okay, can I actually take a line bike? Feel free to drop me a message. Can I take a line bike, right? Or can I cycle into work? Or can I just get off 1 tube stop earlier and just walk 5 minutes into the office? So you see there how we're looking at potential barriers. Then we're looking at, okay, what are my priorities? And then we're looking at, okay, how can I start intertwining little things into my life that are going to make it easier for me? So I already have here a social cue, going to see friends, going to go for a run, right? I've already got actually I'm not ticked off all the cues here. Let's say visual cue, going to go to work, I'm going to leave my bike by the door, right? So that then straight away I'm like, bike, helmet, bag packed, my change of clothes for work, right? It's all there by the door already. We've reduced the barrier. We've also triggered that cue for in the morning, be like, oh yeah, said I was going to bike. So when you're coming downstairs, you're not thinking, oh, I've got loads of time, I've just got to take the tube, it'll take me 15, 20 minutes. You actually come down the stairs and you remind yourself straight away, oh, I said I was going to bike, right? Is that a good enough response for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just like in terms of doing that, so it's what can you leave, having stuff by the door, as Tony mentioned, just to make it as easy as possible. So when you're like, how am I going to get to work or see my friends or whatever it is, you've just planned that little bit ahead. You've made it as easy as possible. So then it's just a case of picking your bike up on the way out and off you go.
Yeah, perfect. Now, we're going to move on from cues and start speaking about that last area that I think we've mentioned quite a lot now in terms of your social environment. And a really nice quote that I've heard time and time again, and a lot of listeners probably heard this, is the idea that you are the sum of 5 people you spend the most time with. Dave, I'm sure you've heard that quote before.
So many times. And as I've got older and as I've, potentially obviously going from like school environment to then kind of uni and then different work environments, it genuinely is really, really true. So be selective about those 5 people because obviously they're really important. I would recommend a mix of obviously, your close friends, but also you want people, where do you want to be in life and what kind of things do you want to be doing? Because if you can hang around with those kind of people that are potentially a little bit further ahead of you on your journey, that's where you learn, you absorb, they can teach you and you can learn and potentially help them as well. And I think that's just, there's so much value in there. So it's really important to consider that. And, one thing that you can think about today is, are the 5 people around me, are they pushing me to where I want to be and where I want to get to? Or are they doing the opposite and potentially pulling me away from that person that I want to be?
Yeah. Bang on, right? So it's that, again, linking back to previous episode. Good job there. In those towards away moves, I think we spoke about the like choice points and having committed actions, right? So are these people that I'm surrounding myself with, are they making it easier for me to make these towards moves, or are they trying to, or not even trying to, sorry, are they without realizing just dragging me away a little bit? And now what's really important is we're not turning around to you and being like, go and ditch your friend. What we're saying is just be a little bit more aware of it and think to yourself, okay, actually, is this friend useful in this scenario? I remember someone on a previous podcast I'd done a couple of years back now turned around and said that he views his friends as almost like a team, right? So he has around him different friends for different things, right? You're going to have your friend who's like, oh, he's great to go out with, have a real good laugh with, like, you know, you can have a great Saturday night, Friday night with them, but he probably isn't the one that's going to drag you out on the long run that you've been avoiding, or he's not the one that's going to take you to the gym and start grinding away. It's because it's just not something that they personally are very interested in. Doesn't mean you go and ditch them. It just means you're aware that actually, okay, fantastic friend, love and adore him, but in that scenario might not be most useful for me. So it's just having an awareness of your friends can, you know, no one's going to fit the mold of like the ideal friend, apart from me. No one's going to fit the mold of the ideal friend. So it's that way of being like, okay, actually maybe Dave is someone that I can go and hang out with, and if I'm having a week where I'm struggling, I can go and vent, I can let off some steam to him, he'll listen, maybe offer me some advice, etc. My other friend who I said, you know, go out on Friday night is good for, perhaps I just need to escape some of lots of life going on and just enjoy myself. Then you have another friend that you're like, okay, actually, you know, I really admire how dedicated they are and how they've built up habits and they've built up a routine in their life where they go to the gym on a regular basis. Okay, I'm going to try and see them once a week. So you see how there, what we're doing is you're again having an awareness of friends. You're not ditching them, but you're utilizing them in a way that benefits you the most.
I think that's a really great prompt. And as I say, not everybody needs to be doing absolutely everything across a whole spectrum. And when you think about your people in life, you might have someone that you can go to the gym with, and they might not want to go out on a Thursday or Friday or Saturday or whatever it is. And that's absolutely fine. And I think once you start to consider those people, and then you can put people in the right place for where you want to be with them. So you're not like forcing any kind of habits. You're not forcing your ways off them. And you could be that person that's wanting to go out and potentially, you know, you're trying to convince your friend that doesn't really want to. Like, it can work in opposite ways as well. And in terms of practical advice, and again, you might have your 5 people and that might be kind of solid. You're super happy with those. If obviously you're unable to change or don't want to, that's completely up to you. What you can then think about is, how do I then prime this person to help me try and achieve my goals? And I've had this with a lot of my clients in the past, where they're doing this weight loss journey, but then their partner, as soon as Friday night comes, they're like cracking open the bottle of wine. They'll want to get on the phone on the Uber Eats and order something in. Well, actually, if you can just have that conversation with your partner or your friend or whatever it is and be like, look, just for this 12 weeks, I just want to be really good. I want to lock into my goals. I want to achieve this because it will make me feel X, Y, and Z. I'll be a lot happier. I'll be a better partner. Can you just support me while I do this? That is an example of how you can help prime your environment with the person that you love the most, so they can actually achieve your goals as well. And, you know, if you kind of leave these intentions or whatever, if you leave them unspoken, and you're getting annoyed kind of in your head or under your breath because they're not helping you, well, have you actually had that conversation with that person so they can go on to help you? Because if you're just assuming that, then potentially that could lead to a bit of friction there. So that's something to consider as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Really good. And again, accountability comes into this really nicely. So going to fitness classes, building up those relationships with people within those classes, or even just the trainer themselves, really helps that accountability part, right? You're not having to be the only person holding yourself accountable. Just like Dave said there, if you've had a conversation with a partner or a good friend, they then are going to drop you a message, or they're going to remind you in the week and say, oh, you said you weren't going to do this because you're working towards that, and you said that it was going to help you, or you pitched to me that I can't have my Domino's on Friday because you said that you really wanted to get into this shape because it was going to help you become a bit more confident or a bit more happy in yourself, which means that I'm now benefiting from it. Then it's easier, right? There's someone there who's just like how we said, leaving the shoes by the door. This also is helping with that accountability element as well. I think it leads me nicely onto speaking about joining communities as well to help with that social environment. Now, I feel like you'd have to be living under a rock to not know that Dave is heavily involved in his own fitness community, but there's a real reason behind that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, want to become a stronger, better, and faster runner? You don't need another cookie cutter program. You need a coach. Cooper is a coach in your pocket, and they provide real structure, real expertise, and real accountability. And because you're a Move Well, Live Well listener, you'll get an extended 2-week free trial when you sign up and use the code MOVEWELL on the app. Cooper, not a plan, a coach. It actually sparked when one of my friends, they moved from Manchester after uni to York, and when they came, they were working in an industry where, you know, a lot of their colleagues were 50-year-old white men, middle-aged. They didn't have a lot of in common. And actually, when you move to a new city, it's so hard to make friends. If you don't want to hang around with people from work, so then it's okay. So I wanted to create this environment where people that could then come down, and it's like people with similar interests getting together and doing similar things. Because as we say, the people in your life, you don't have to have similar interests. If everybody had the similar interests, the world would be a pretty boring place. So it's absolutely fine. But, you know, what we would ask you guys to consider is how can you search for these new environments? If you like doing X sport, if you used to love playing netball in school but haven't played since school, you know, what can you do? Who can you find? What activities or groups are there around you that you can find this environment? And as Tony kind of mentioned, if you do, York and London for now, hopefully in the UK, we'd love to welcome you down, but that's obviously just one example. And there's plenty of opportunities. It could be a chess club. It could be, you know, sewing or painting or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be sport. Obviously, that's what we recommend to a lot of people to obviously get out there. But, you know, it can be anything that you have hobbies and interests in. And mainly it's just about finding your environment. And for a lot of people, for the first time, it's going to be difficult to put yourself out there. But I've never met anybody that's regretted it, really.
No, 100%. And my biggest tip towards anyone that, and it doesn't really relate to this podcast, but what I've been saying to people in general is I moved to London and was someone that was like, I want to get back involved in running, and I want to, you know, increase my social circle in London as well, because I knew moving there, I didn't know loads of people. And the first few times I went to this run club in question, like I was a little bit nervous, a bit quiet. And it took me about 2 months, I think, to start being like, oh, I'm actually getting some of it. It just took me having the confidence and the trust in probably in my own knowledge I've done through exercise psychology, and knowing that just need to turn up again and again and again, just like with your posting on social media, right? And eventually got to that place where, you know, after one of the run clubs on a Wednesday, we're like, hey, let's go to the pub. And then suddenly you start chatting and you're building up that relationship. But it takes a little while to get to know these people, but I can guarantee you it does happen. And then, you know, long story short, a year later, I was involved in leading and running a track night and helping lead and run a new run club that had blossomed from, you know, all these relationships that I'd start building up. So it's that way. If you go again and again and again, one, you never know what could happen, and two, I guarantee you'll start getting the results. But there's also another thing that happens when we join these social communities, is that, now you have to be careful of this, but is that you start tying your identity a little bit with that community you're in. So you shift from, and I see it all the time, and actually recently, so we're currently one of the communities I'm involved in is training to, we're training up for a half marathon. And this girl turned around to me back in June and said, oh, I'm not a runner. And then last week she just hit an 18K, and literally like 2 days later went and did a Monday night track session that we run. And I'm like, you just said you weren't a runner. Now I can guarantee you she views herself as a little bit of a runner. Right, because she has become part of this community, so her identity has now become a little bit more about running. Now there's balances in between overly identifying with that, but equally that just by shifting that perspective and saying I am now someone who runs, it ties you into it a little bit more, which again increases that accountability element.
100%. And I think, you know, when we actually referenced this in last week's episode, again, it's like how to be consistent. It's not by saying to yourself, I am someone, I go running, or I want to go running. It's be like, I am the kind of person that goes to these run clubs, that gets involved with these things, that is a runner. And it's through kind of changing that self-identity that is how you become consistent and actually enjoy it. And, you know, eventually, you know, are able to sustain those efforts and really do it. And I think it's important what you mentioned there. Obviously, we've both moved to London, and you can tell me a little bit about your I guess motivations for that. But I mean, for me, I love York, where I'm from, my hometown. I absolutely love it. I think it's amazing. But I just thought that things were coming a bit stale. The opportunities are obviously a lot less. And we're not saying to everybody you need to move to London. However, we are saying that if you're potentially not where you need to be in life, actually changing your physical environment. And for us, it was moving cities. And honestly, it's one of the best things that I've ever done. And again, it's priming yourself about who you're hanging around, the networking. You know, as you mentioned, you were just kind of going nights out, meeting people, and then all of a sudden now you're involved and you're helping lead these community sessions. And that's all come about from just being in the right environment, surrounding yourself in the right people, moving to the right places. And again, we're not telling you need to move cities or anything drastic like that. We're just saying that if something doesn't feel quite right, if things have got a bit stale, then actually changing where you are in terms of your physical environment. It could be changing gyms, or, you know, going to, as we mentioned, different clubs or run clubs or whatever it is, or even just changing, if you work at home full time, going to a co-working space and potentially meeting other people. I think there's a huge amount of power in that. And I think we've both seen that as well in the flesh.
Yeah, 100%. There's definitely, for me, moving to London was a little bit around, career opportunities. But then equally for people around my age, so in like mid to late 20s now, it was very much like this is where everyone seems to be, and it's where everything was happening. So I was like, I want to go there and just experience this new city life for a little bit. I'm from Ipswich, so it's very much not a city. So that was nice, and experiencing that, and just, it seems to be where things are happening. There's opportunities around career growth. And yeah, again, it was that sort of, okay, there's a lot of people my age there. There must be people that are active. Oh, here we go, shock horror. 2 years later now, I'm surrounded by so many people who are all pretty active, pretty fit. But then it worked really well in terms of, like I said, I think after I finished uni, I said for years I wanted to get back into running. Went to London, and lo and behold, I'm back into running, not because I was really accountable and ruthlessly consistent, but because what I accidentally did was fall into a community where everyone was encouraging you and like pushing you to stay true to that. And sorry, I know you want to speak there, but just in a group chat the other day, I've mentioned here, I've been injured for a little while, ran like 6.5K, and I had, 13, 14 mates messaging me being like, congratulations, obviously Strava kudos is great, but actually the personal messages were so nice. Now, to say if I was trying to do that by myself, completely different story, and a completely, like, I'd have to really be pulling on my internal motivation even more.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's a terrific example. And kind of just to reference the bit about running and your environment is, I would consider myself a fairly confident-ish runner. Again, if I was to put it into context of back home in York, fairly good in that kind of, I guess, the pool of runners, and then moved to London, came down to TWP and the Weekend Project and their track nights, and all of a sudden I'm in like the bottom percentile, really struggling to keep up with these runners. And I think you can kind of do one of two things. You can kind of think, oh my God, like I'm never going to be as good as these people, like they're so much better than me. Or you can rise to the challenge and actually consider like, okay, so now I'm in an environment where there are people that are way better than I am. And for me, it was kind of like a humbling experience. I'm kind of like meant to be this personal trainer and online coach, and going down to one of these sessions, I was like, okay, like I'm ready for it. And then to actually like be really struggling in the session and realize there's so many people, kind of like lit a fire in my ass. I was like, okay, like this is like the next level of like running. And I think, if you are, and I can't remember where this quote was from, but it's like, if you are the biggest person in your gym, you're probably in the wrong gym. And I think that is like, you can either be a really big fish in a smallish pond, or then you can try and move to a bigger pond where you maybe is not a bigger fish, but ultimately by surrounding yourselves with, I guess, more of a competitive environment, if you're up to the challenge, then that could really push you on to then develop yourself and, rise to the challenge.
Yeah, 100%. It effectively, what happens is it starts when you're that fish in that new pond, it then becomes more normalized, and you feel like, it becomes more of the norm, right? You're not this like it's that elitist person. Now you realize, oh, actually there's way more people like me. And again, just like with the identity thing, it's really beneficial, but then from a well-being side, also be conscious of it as well, right? Because I see quite a lot of people, they get sucked into it, they get really competitive, and then they end up burning out because they're trying to do too much, or they're trying to do too much of that comparison piece. So it's a really nice point you raised there, and I'm glad the session I planned for you that day humbled you a bit. But yeah, fantastic. I think we spoke really nicely through obviously how you can utilize cues, the social environment, a little bit the psychological benefits as well. Is there anything else that I've missed out, Dave?
I guess I would love to hear, I guess, what you do. Let's maybe think about from a work perspective, because I think, again, what do you do to help you stay more productive? We spoke a lot about how, you can prime your environment to help you exercise and to potentially help you to eat healthier by having healthy stuff the way you can visually see it, by maybe planning and prepping a little bit more, by hiding those kind of treats in hard to reach places. What do you do from a work perspective to help you kind of prime your environment there that helps you be productive?
Yeah, so I think the first thing, if we're going to go by environmental cues, what I'd already look to do is go into like have a specific almost room in my house or space in my house where I know when I sit down here, it's to do work and it's to focus, right? So that's one thing I'm like, as soon as I sit in that area, I'm already associating that with, right, I'm here to do work. I'm not here to just chill and relax. The next bit is, putting the phone away. Really simple.
So important.
Right? Put it on Do Not Disturb. I've got a Garmin, right? So it buzzes. And if I don't have my phone on me, my Garmin will buzz and distract me anyway. So put it on Do Not Disturb. Put it in a different room because I am addicted to this really annoying old brick phone that I've got.
We
here.
all are, mate.
So put it in a different room and then set out goals that I want to complete in that day. But then before all of that, and it's something I need to get way better at. I know my girlfriend will be rolling her eyes being like, yeah, right, as if you do all this. But something I know I need to get better at is sitting down either on a Monday, because I block out a Monday morning now, sitting down and going, right, here is my week. These are when my clients are currently booked in for, and knowing that more people will book in, or hopefully more people book in, where do I need to block out times to do bits of admin, to do little bits of posting onto socials, to do bits of outreach, to do little bits of, building and establishing relationships with other organizations. What do I need to complete? And then where can I fit that into my schedule, right? So then I get that notification alerts and my Google Calendar telling me, hey, this is admin time. You're going to sit down and organize that Excel file that you've been putting off for ages. I say, okay, then it's down to me, right, to sit down and do that. The next thing as well is actually organizing, going to a cafe and sitting down and doing work with a friend, because all of my work at the moment is remote. So when I say I'm going to go and sit down and do work with a friend, okay, we're going to meet at this time, at this point, I'm going to go and sit down and actually tell them what I said I was going to do in these 2-3 hours that I've got with them. So that's some of the tactics I use at the moment in order to actually make it more likely that week's going to be a successful week, and now I can sort of prime my environment to do that as well.
Yeah, I love that. And just as you were speaking there, I think the setting up, going to an intentional place and then putting your phone, locking away in another room is so important. Whenever I'm my most productive, it's when I'm in that flow. And hopefully as well, what Tony was saying for you guys is that we are real people. We are not telling you need to wake up an ice bath and do all these kind of journaling and stuff. What we're saying is that we're also human beings. We know the habits and the environment that will make us most productive. And we're not saying that we do this 100% of the times, but I think we have that kind of wherewithal to know, okay, so when I actually do it, that's when I'm so much more productive. And sometimes the scrolling, or, doing the easy thing, that gets the better of us and it gets the better result. But as we say, the more wins that you can stack, the more that you can prime your environment to be able to do those easy things, then just like us, the more that you can start actually doing them rather than kind of going and following that path of least resistance. And that's all what this episode is about. Yeah.
Fantastic, really good. And Dave, I don't know if you've got any other little bits of tips and tricks that you do to utilize. I know you've built up a really nice, combined a habit in the fact that you often will go for a walk and do a little bit of admin stuff, right?
Yeah, and all my client replies, if I've got to do voice notes, then tying that together and doing a walk and then sending voice notes. So that's taking 2 tasks and then doing them together. And again, I can be really, involved and focused on that task rather than kind of flicking between 2 things. So I think that is a really good thing. And then, just making sure that it's getting as easy as possible because, and for me, changing environment, as you mentioned, going out and setting that time aside has been really effective in terms of, as you say, going in with intention. And I think it's that word intention. Then it's we're not just working from our bed or whatever. We're sat down, we're locked in, phones away, and then we're ready to, get on it.
Yeah, perfect. I think there's Yeah, really good advice from you there. And I think we've shared some really nice, insightful tips, tricks, and as you say, golden nuggets for the listeners. What is left for today's episode for us to make it as perfect as possible for our listeners?
Well, we always, as you know, leave you guys with questions that we want you to take away and ponder. So we've got 3, what we think is obviously good questions for you guys. But again, so we've spoken about, you don't need more motivation. You just need a better environment. And it's all about making those good choices easy and the bad choices harder. And then deciding your environment so success becomes automatic rather than every single decision you're making be a manual choice to make the right decision. It's how do you then make that as automatic as possible. So in line with that, the first question today would be, if someone works into your kitchen or your workspace right now, would they be able to tell what your goals are just by looking at them? Because if that answer is no, then potentially you haven't primed your environment to where you want to get to. And if the answer is yes, and you walk in and that's a clear intention for every time that you walk into your space, then automatically you're setting yourself up to that with that intention to then make it as easy as possible.
Yeah, brilliant. Great question there. And just thinking to myself about what's my kitchen looking like, and maybe I need to note down on the calendar on our fridge what my goal is, so that every day when I go to get my milk for my coffee, I'm like reading that and re-emphasizing it to myself. So yeah, great first question. What's our next?
Number 2, what's one thing in your environment that is silently pulling you away from your goals every single day? And again, this is what we spoke about last week. What's pulling you towards your goals and what's pulling you away from your goals?
Yeah, brilliant. Again, definitely my phone. So I'm trying to get better at putting that one away.
That's going to be, I imagine that's going to be common for a lot of people. And then finally, if you change one thing about your environment this week, what would make the biggest difference to your success? So we really want you guys to take away and think, okay, what's one thing that I can get started with? How can I change this bit of environment to just make that decision and those choices a lot easier for me this week?
Yeah, brilliant. And if that's that you feel like after what we've spoken about, obviously very passionately about joining a community, then you've got 2 communities that we shouted out today. So do go and check them out.
There you go. And then, as you guys know, we always leave you with a quote. It's my turn this week. And I think we've both spoken about this. The GOAT, Eliud Kipchoge, actually uses this one. I think it's an old Chinese proverb, and that's, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. And I love this one because it really kind of illustrates the point that no matter where you are in your life, whether that's getting started with exercise, whether it's chasing that passion project or starting up that side hustle, you might not have been able to start it 20 years ago, but you do have the action and determination, and you can start that now. And that's the best time to get started.
Oh yeah, I love that quote. I think when you say it to me, I was like, oh, I remember, and I actually said I've used that audio before on like a social media clip that I've created because it's just so powerful. It's like self-explanatory, right? And it motivates me to be like, hey, yeah, there's never going to be the perfect opportunity for me to do this. So why don't I just go out and just get started? Like, a lot of like contractors talk about just going out and breaking ground, right? So let's just get that first shovel in the ground and start getting moving. And then who knows what's going to happen. I know when I started and really made that conscious decision to be like, I'm going to just try and build my own, private practice business around sports psychology. I had no idea what it's going to look like, but I was like, this is the first step I'm going to take. And like I've so far have no regrets. And it's like there was so many times before that when I kept on being like, oh, but I haven't done this, I've not done that. And it's that way of like, it's never going to be perfect. So just get started.
Love that. Love that. So there you have it, guys. Another episode in the bag. I hope you've enjoyed this one. Next week, we are going to be talking about prepping for events and how to make those as successful as possible. But thank you all very much for listening. Like, subscribe, share it with a mate who would love to hear this, all that good stuff. And we will see you in next week's episode.
See you later, guys.